Okay, we're switching gears now, looking at developments in the health sector, how to rebuilding our health sector. And we have in the studio the Mr. Mike Egbo, National Program Manager, Partnership for Transforming Health Systems. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Let's begin by asking you, what's your take on the health sector as it is now?
Well, a big question. I think the health sector is moving in the right direction. I think we have a lot of work to do. I don't want to say yes, we're not working well, but there are a lot of challenges. There are political challenges. I don't think we have technical challenges because we have some of the best trained doctors and nurses in the world. But the question is, why do we have such bad health indices? You know, because the National Demographic Health Survey will soon come out, you know, and there was one done on MDGs that showed that the health indices are dropping. But still, we can't confirm that that is the truth, you know, because the problem is we have not been able to put health in the front burner of our political activities. You know, we are very good at reacting to issues as opposed to responding to them. You know, because when you react, when something happens, you react. You know, as opposed to planning ahead. But what has happened in the private sector in the last few years since 2010 is developing a national strategic health development plan for 5 years that ensure that the states and the local government are active participants. So we are not looking at health, because you frequently hear this saying that health is on the concurrent list, which means you can do what you want to do. But for the first time, we have a plan that is national. Then we also have the state plan. But the question is, how do we get everybody to buy into that plan? Exactly. You know, so that's what is happening. You know, but there are a number of initiatives. You've had about saving 1 million lives. Yeah, you have about Shopees, emergency transport system. You have midwife scheme, you know, for primary health care. And then only last week there's this private sector initiative that was launched by Bill Gates, Dangote, and other groups. You know, so I think there is a gradual movement in the right direction, but it's not enough.
Well, you know, you talked about the fact that you say technical manpower is not, or technical know-how is not exactly an area where we're not strong, so to speak. But what would you say, I mean, when we look at the population of patients to a doctor, it would seem that our doctors are still very well overstretched.
Very correct. I mean, we are still below the WHO standard of 1 doctor to 600 patients. We are about 1 doctor to 2,000 plus here in Nigeria. You know, and 1 nurse to about 3,000 patients. You know, so it's still very, very low. There's a major gap there. But the question is, with the over 70,000 doctors, about 70,000 doctors we have in Nigeria, is that all we have? The answer is no. We are training doctors to go and work elsewhere. You know, and there's a reason for why they're going. If you go to the US, you meet Nigerian doctors doing very well. You go to the Middle East, that people run to. The doctors there are Nigerians. You know, most of those hospitals in Saudi Arabia, they're Nigerian doctors. You go to other countries in Africa, Nigerian doctors are there. I was in Zambia and I was surprised to find a Nigerian in the remotest part of Zambia. Is there, you know, so what is that thing that is driving our doctors away from here? What is that thing that is making our nurses to take off? You know, because you have recruiters coming here. We're training nurses. One statistic we had about 4 years ago was about 3,000 nurses were trained in this country. Out of that 3,000, about 2,900 apply for jobs outside the country.
In your own experience, what exactly is driving that? Could it just be financial?
I don't think it's financial. If we have a system that is functioning, if you have a place, because I think it's painful for a doctor to know he can save a malaria patient and watch that patient die because you don't have the drugs, you don't have the system, the water is not working, the electricity, you don't have the necessary tools. So there's that frustration, because if the system here is functioning effectively, I don't think that our Nigerian doctors will want to run away from here. You know, so I think it's a function of the infrastructure which is being developed now, but it's not up to speed. Again, I go back to the fact that we have not made health a political issue. It's not something, you don't hear campaigners saying, oh yes, when I come in, women will have access to healthcare, children will have access to, we don't hear it in campaigns. We don't hear them saying the statistics will drop. That you have hospitals here. You frequently hear them, they build one hospital that is in the air that will not be built. But they never touch that aspect until some of them run into health problems and they die. But they have not learned from it.
You've mentioned something. You've talked about how infrastructure sometimes might not be, you said it could be a problem, but you also talked about how access to that infrastructure could also be a problem. They don't say things like women will have more access to healthcare or maternal mortality will drop, you should be able to have your children safely. But we hear things like we will build hospitals. Is there a disconnect in terms of understanding what truly the problem is in the health sector?
I wouldn't say there's a total disconnect, but there's some element of disconnect. So you find that when people make such flowery statements, we will build infrastructure, it's out of ignorance. Because you have to use statistics to develop your infrastructure. You don't go and build a hospital that will not be used in a locality where you don't have the people, because that's what is frequently happening. You have politicians taking hospitals to their places and building state-of-the-art hospital. You see the building, but you don't see, it's like a structure, but there's no heart in it. There are no tools, there's nothing working there. If you look at Ghana as an example, they set up a committee that looked at the various regions of Ghana and identified their various health problems and develop health system to respond to those health problems. The health problem you have in the Niger Delta is not what you have in northern Nigeria. So we must look at those regional realities and respond to that. We must look at the statistics that are coming from the communities and use that to plan. Until we start to use information to plan, we'll continue to make mistakes. I think that's the biggest problem.
Okay, looking at the statistics now, and my colleague talked about access to some of these infrastructure. Let's look at mortality rates, for instance. It's been up there, and okay, the health practitioners have talked about how they can help to bring this down, but what are the things that need to be done to really help bring this down?
It's multiple approach. We do not, like I said, we do not lack technology. We do not lack people who can bring about change, but we lack that attitude to bring about change. I frequently hear people say, let's bring results from, the study, success stories from Rwanda. Let's bring success stories from Bangladesh. We have to first ask ourselves, what are the environmental situation in those places? What is the political situation in those places? Do they have interest in health? Do they have corruption? Do they have the right person? Because you don't just uproot something from somewhere and bring to a different place where our attitude. Because the question is, why will a medical doctor, for instance, who is in the ministry, order vaccines that will expire very soon, like in 3 months, when the country cannot consume it? Why will the pharmacist do the same thing? Why will a nurse not attend to a patient? So for me, I think the first thing we need to do is our attitude. We need to look at the attitude of health workers, the attitude of politicians, people who release money, because you hear money released for health, but at the end of the year, how much of that money has been spent? I said you have money, you have funds budgeted for health, but how much of that money has been released for those purposes? At the end of the year, you discover it's not been released. But if it's a country where you actually pay attention, where the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Finance, Education, they are playing their part in health, because health is not just Federal Ministry of Health alone. You need education, because if you're not, ignorance is part of the problem. You need information, you need agric, you need nutrition, you need roads, because we're talking about access. People cannot get there, because I was in Anambra the other month, and a retired soldier was giving a story of how they were taking somebody from a village to the nearest town. A pastor was sick. On their way, their vehicle was stuck. And the man died at 2 a.m. in the night because they could not move. We're talking about road. That's access. The man would have survived if he made it to the hospital, but from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m., they had no help. They were stopped because the road was bad. And there are many like that. There are some people who have accidents and they're dead, but there's no emergency system to move them. So for me, I think we need to look at the Nigerian mind, our attitude. How do we change that attitude? We have National Orientation Agency. Health should not just be health alone. National Orientation Agency is very active in every local government area in this country. How do we get them to change the mindset of people? How do we get them to get the people like local government to put money into health? How do we empower women to even know what to do to take their health into consideration? Because there are places where women cannot, even when they are in pain, they cannot go to the hospital unless their husband is around to give that permission. So there is this attitude and culture we must deal with. That's, for me, what will change the dynamics.